This short video is about the debate on minimum standards of academic freedom, specifically on subjects and limits. It is clear that what is protected by academic freedom is the production and transfer of scientific knowledge in a democratic society. Its ultimate goal is the development of the society. It is also clear that the different academics, students who participate in the critical debate on interesting things for society should be under protection. Why do I think it is very important? Academic freedom is under threat in Latin American context, but also it is under threat in China, in Turkey, in Iran, in Pakistan, in other countries. Which subjects are protected by academic freedom? It is necessary to highlight its collective and individual notion as a human right, and the link to academic freedom with freedom of expression, right to information, freedom of association, and other human rights. On the subjects under protection, we should highlight the idea of the democratic society. The democracy and development are the ultimate goals of academic freedom. Second, the universities or the institutions of higher education. And third, we should identify the university actors involved in the academia. I mean, the professors, researchers, the students, but also the professionals, the undergraduate as well. It is very debatable, but it's very important. About the universities, they are collective subjects that require special protection. The recommendation on the status of higher education teaching personnel from UNESCO establishes the obligation of states to protect higher education institutions from threats against their autonomy. The autonomy of the higher education institutions is a principle that is very important to accomplish academic freedom. About who makes up the university, the academia, the debate is now open. It represents a core element to determine who can be protected by academic freedom. While the Lima Declaration mentions that everyone has the right, without discrimination, to be part of the academic community as a student, professor, researcher, worker, or administrator, other law instruments do not mention workers or administrators. Furthermore, an even more restrictive doctrinal vision reduces the protection of academic freedom only to professor researchers. The General Comment 13, in its paragraph 38, states that faculty and students have the right to academic freedom. So, I think it's very important to overcome the last restrictive vision. The Lima Declaration on Academic Freedom and Autonomy of Higher Education Institutions establishes rights for members of the academic community who carry out investigative, teaching, and student functions, and refers to some of the higher education institutions. The Economic, Social, and Cultural Committee from the United Nations has understood that faculty and students may be especially vulnerable to political and other pressures that threaten academic freedom, so each one is individually protected. So, who are the subjects under protection of academic freedom? Without no doubt, professors, researchers, and also students. Regarding the upcoming controversial debate about who is supposed to represent the university government, In Venezuela, the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court of Justice made a conceptual error, a conceptual mistake, which imposed the election of university authorities, including workers and administrative personnel, along with professors, students, and graduates. This also contradicts Constitutional Article 109 in Venezuela and undermines the autonomy of Venezuelan universities. From Aula Abierta, we have promoted the debate on this and proposed an organic law on rights, guarantees, and duties in university education. This includes the idea of the participation of administrative personnel, but without any interference on academic government of the universities. In essence, the academy is represented by professors, researchers, and students who are the beneficiaries and co-builders of the educational process, but also it is represented by graduates who are the professionals linked to the society and its development after an educational process in universities. However, it is debatable to incorporate graduates as subjects protected by academic freedom. I mean, there is no doubt about the different professionals who research inside the university, but the question is, what happened with professionals or graduates who are not involved in university activities, but they work, for example, in hospitals or they work in any institution developing researching activities, but researching activities inside that institution which is not part of a university. So, in the context, for example, of the coronavirus pandemic, the importance of academic freedom is notable. According to this approach, medical professionals who carry out medical research in health centers, despite not being formally linked to a university, still should be understood as subjects protected by academic freedom in relation to the production of professional scientific knowledge. What they are researching inside a hospital, inside a health center, is protected by academic freedom because they are professionals who are developing scientific research, and so academic freedom protection is clear in this case. In the first video, I mentioned already some of the consequences for societies when academic freedom is violated. This is especially also alarming during this pandemic of the coronavirus. Various experts have been silenced in Venezuela, also in Nicaragua, and among others, and cannot speak out on the possible increase, for example, of the coronavirus cases. How is it possible that key issues in society cannot be analyzed because of the fear of possible retaliation? I also mentioned in the first video about the restrictions that engineering professors have or face to talk about the situation of the electricity problems in my country, about the blackouts in Venezuela. Another open discussion is whether university actors represent subjects who should require special protection. Do they deserve to be considered vulnerable groups when they criticize authoritarian regimes or when they face restrictive situations? They do require special protection, especially if they face authoritarian regimes and they criticize with scientific knowledge, with critical opinion regard to democracy, those authoritarian regimes. But they also can be under any kind of threats in democracy's context. University actors are people who are vulnerable when they produce critical academic work in the context of an authoritarian regimes or in the context of any restrictive situation, They could be in a democracy, but they could face a restrictive situation. However, is their vulnerability permanent or temporary? The doctrine of high-risk journalists used in the freedom of expression approach, the freedom of expression corpus juris, the freedom of expression law, could be applied analogically. Regarding the last part of this short video, academic freedom does not mean an endorsement of the idea that everything is allowed in the university. So there is a very rich doctrine on the limits and restrictions of freedom of expression, for example, which can be developed analogically for academic freedom as well. The enjoyment of academic freedom entails obligations, such as the duty to respect the academic freedom of others, to ensure fair discussion on contrary opinions, to treat everyone without discrimination, and to respect human rights of others, of course. Article 19 from the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights provides that freedom of expression may be subject to restrictions that must be established by law and necessary to ensure respect for the rights or reputation of others and the protection of national security, public order, public health, or morals. Academic freedom limits and restrictions could be analogically developed as well. The notion of democratic society in the examination of the legality of restrictions on human rights is fundamental as well. It is interpreted in Article 32 of the American Convention on Human Rights, which also provides that the rights of each person are limited by those of others for the safety of all and for the common good. Likewise, any limit to academic freedom must pursue legitimate, reasonable, and proportional purposes in complying with the sense of responsibility to society and in accordance with laws enacted for reasons of general interest and in accordance with the purpose for which such restrictions have been established. The recommendation on the status of higher education teaching personnel from UNESCO states that autonomy should not be used by higher education institutions as a pretext to limit the rights of higher education teaching personnel, and that self-government, collegiality, and appropriate academic leadership are essential elements of true institutional autonomy. The decision T-239 of 2018 from the Colombian Constitutional Court solved the tutela action filed against the University of Ibagué by Mónica Godoy Ferro, who was a university professor and defender of women's rights inside the university. The court established that university autonomy does not imply absolute power and cannot disregard the fundamental rights of workers and students. Therefore, university autonomy is limited in respect of fundamental rights. And the court, the Constitutional Court of Colombia, in this case, ruled in favor of Mónica Godoy, understanding that the autonomy of the University of Ibagué, the autonomy of the universities is restricted, is limited in the protection of human rights. In order to conclude, as I have explained in the last videos on international advocacy, on academic freedom, and the discussion, the debate of some minimum standards, my recommendation to international human rights bodies is to request their attention on determining standards on what are the subjects under academic freedom protection, and what is the object and main purposes, and what are the limits on academic freedom in a very accurate way. What its main distinction with other rights is rights such as freedom of expression and information, right to education, or freedom of association. My suggestion is to study the General Comment 13 from the Economic, Social and Cultural Rights Committee, which is very accurate, but it is needed a more robust regulation. I would like to conclude proposing to the United Nations Human Rights Council the possibility of thinking about the creation of a special rapporteur on academic freedom and autonomy of higher education institutions. For sure, it could enhance the different developing and production of different standards in international community on academic freedom regarding its strong relationship with democracy and development. If you're interested in studying in depth the situation of academic freedom in Latin American context, please check our websites and social networking. Thank you very much.